So the Skull Merchant PTB changes are here, and it's bad. Really, really bad. Like, you know the killer change is brutal when there are multiple Reddit threads now basically asking for a wellness check on me, and in answer to your concerns, by the way guys, no, I am very much not well, thank you for asking. This PTB has tons and tons of changes, some of which are fine and some of which are really quite dangerous. But the centerpiece, at least to me, is the vivisection of my favourite killer, the Skull Merchant. They call it a, medium update in the forum post, but slapping 5 uncompensated nerfs onto a low B to high C tier killer and calling it an update is like me burning your house down, shooting your dog, and salting your front lawn so nothing will ever grow there again, and then calling it a renovation. I'm not going to bury the lead here. If the Skull Merchant PTB changes make it to the live servers, she's dropping to D tier. Possibly the single weakest killer in the game, and certainly in the bottom 3, scrapping it out with Myers and Freddy. I'll tell you why in a little bit, but I just want to make something completely clear before we continue. Just because these nerfs are insane on the face of it, doesn't mean I think Merchant was perfect or didn't need any changes at all. She absolutely did. Her skill floor was too low, similar to killers like Legion and Chucky, and that combined with the Barrage of Status effect and the high requirement for knowledge she puts on survivors playing against her, made her insufferable for a lot of people to play against. I like playing against her personally because I know how she works in a very fundamental level, so I know all the little tricks and everything. I know how the Merchant player thinks. But I know that's not exactly a common opinion, and yes, she did need changes to raise her skill floor and lessen the pain points the character has. The problem is that these changes are not how you do it. She didn't need to be weaker, she needed to be harder. So that Skull Merchant players who don't know what they're doing will struggle more, survivors are put under less information overload against her, and Skull Merchant players who are better with the killer get rewarded appropriately for the knowledge and time put into learning them. And this, public execution almost completely missed the mark on that. If you want to know what I would have done, by the way, I made a video on this fairly recently and you can take a look for yourself. If these were the best changes that could be done after a year of trying to fix her issues, I'd be unhappy, but I'd probably accept it. But they're not. There's very obviously other ways to tone this killer down and sort out her issues without just slaughtering her. Let's not forget here, this is the first balance change Skull Merchant has received since her rework hit a year ago. They've not actually tried sorting out her issues. Behaviour took her straight to the guillotine after a year, and that's hugely infuriating.
Yeah, you've got to help us, Doc. We've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas.
If the killer is in a critical enough state that she demands immediate sledgehammer nerfs, then why has no attempt at tuning her been made before this? What should have been done here is the same thing that Behaviour does whenever a new killer comes out, whenever any live service game releases any new character. See how they land when they release, and tune and adjust them accordingly, to get them into a good and healthy spot without just shooting them in the face. Making the choice to gut her instead of even trying to fix her was lazy, disappointing, and shows nothing but contempt for the character and her player base. Let's just get into it then. No, I had to put off finishing my Frank Stone review to cover this, and I like that game. I could be talking about things that are really cool right now, but they had to do this to Skull Merchant, so let's get on with it. We're starting off with the good stuff to come from this PTB. And to Behaviour's credit, there is at least some value to be had here. For a long time I've said removing the haste would go a long way to raise Skull Merchant's skill floor, and I'm glad they eventually did remove it. Giving a killer a near constant supply of made for this on tap made judging distances in a tile way too difficult, especially because it could change so easily during a chase if multiple survivors got scanned. Getting rid of the haste is pretty much the only thing I knew would be happening to her, and I'm glad it's gone. And this might sound weird, but I also kind of like the idea of drones having only one beam. At least in theory, it reduces the mental strain on a survivor just running a tile with a drone in it, because they only have to track one beam, not two. And it forces the Skull Merchant to use rotation timings well if they want to stack up the survivor quickly. This is a goal I've wanted for a while now. I think rotation timing is one of the skills you should have to learn to play Skull Merchant well, and while I suggested giving the killer 2 beams that rotate slower, one beam that rotates at full speed does the job just as well, if not better. If the killer was properly balanced around it, a single beam per drone forces the killer player to be more skill expressive and use the rotation mechanics to tag survivors properly, instead of just allowing the drone to do it for them. Again, if the killer is balanced around it. And that's the issue with these nerfs. Even without the haste, one beam merchant could be pretty cool and good if she was appropriately compensated and designed around requiring more skill and timing to use one beam. But for reasons I don't fully understand, Behaviour hasn't done this. They've not only failed to compensate her appropriately for what she's lost, but have piled on even more pointless nerfs. If you want to see an example of a change list that balances the killer effectively around only having one beam, look at this suggested balance patch knocked together by my friend Shaders, who removed the haste and one of the beams, but actually compensated the killer fairly by buffing other elements of her kit to reward her for expressing skill, because redesigning the killer around no haste and one beam raises the skill floor enough to justify compensation buffs. By far the pointlessest nerf here is to the hinder a survivor gets when scanned by a drone while already claw trapped, down from 10% for 6 seconds to 5% for 6 seconds. This is a significant hit, especially when combined with a nerf to the haste, because the two together meant that Skull Merchant could close the gap with the survivor 13% faster or more, if she's using add-ons to affect it or had multiple survivors scanned on radar at once. Behaviour saw this as a pain point and nerfed the hinder along with completely removing the haste, but the result of this is that the hinder becomes completely useless. Actually, I'd argue that most of the time it's actually worse than useless. Lighting up a survivor whose claw trap will give them a 5% hinder for 6 seconds, but to do that with one beam, you'll need to either put up a new drone to laser tag them with it, or rotate the beam of an existing drone into them to apply the hinder when you can actually use it. But if you do either of those things, you break Bloodlust, the permanent 5% stacking haste you get for not using your power for a bit. But stacking permanent 5% haste is a lot more effective than a 5% hinder for 6 seconds because it lasts longer, because survivors hug loops tighter than you so nerfing their speed is less effective, and because haste is multiplicative to the speed while hinder is additive, so you just get more distance from haste anyway. So in short, using the power correctly and hindering the survivor gives you a worse benefit than not using your power at all and just bloodlusting instead. Against a survivor who's already claw trapped, the power is actively detrimental to use without add-ons, even if you use it right. Like, they've made a whole power feature that's just not worth ever using. It's complete nonsense. And that leaves the two drone visibility changes. Drones are always in scouting mode now, meaning they'll always rotate at 85 degrees per second with visible beams, and drone beams are now always visible within 16 meters. I get the intention here. They want Skull Merchant to provide more clear visual tells to the survivors as to where the drone is and where the beams are, but this is going to cause so many more issues than it would ever solve, because now means that drones set up ahead of time as traps are absolutely worthless, especially with the changes to only having one beam. One way you'd commonly get lock-on stacks applied outside of chase is by setting them up as traps in high traffic areas, similar to a hag or a trapper. You trap up an area, a survivor who isn't paying attention to the drone runs into a beam, gets a scan, you get information and progress towards an injury. Stealth mode drones not showing the beams was the only thing that made this viable, because it forced the survivor to actively look out for the drone and track its movements directly so they could avoid the beams. Stealth mode drones still gave the survivors plenty of information to work with though. You could track the lights on the drone's housing to see where the beams are pointing, and before you ever got into the drone's range, you could see yellow dots and this ring on the floor to tell you that the drone is nearby and where the range is. In fact, part of Skull Merchant's skill ceiling was knowing placement rules and tricks to hide these visual clues by pushing the visibility ring inside walls or underneath grass or whatever to try to catch survivors. It added depth to the killer because it required map knowledge to do it properly. It gave her the closest thing she has to map pressure and affirmed her identity as Dead by Daylight's first trap killer in 6 years. And it's gone now. Now a survivor can be so brain dead, they don't even need to pay attention and look for that drone anymore. They can just run through the whole radius while angling their camera to look up Sable's skirt. Unless they somehow miss the giant orange beam coming towards them, they will never get scanned. And the whole mono beam thing makes this even worse. With only one beam to control an area instead of two, Skull Merchant's area coverage with her traps got literally halved. So not only are trap drones much easier to spot, they're also half as effective baseline. And let's be clear here, stealth mode drones weren't overpowered or hard to see before because they gave out these other visual clues. If you were getting scanned outside of chase by a stealth mode drone, that's a skill issue. And if you're complaining about it, you're just bad. There's no two ways about it. Pay more attention to your environment and this will not happen to you. More than any other changes in the PTB, the drone visibility changes are hands down the most insultingly bad, because these weren't done because Merchant was too oppressive in a certain aspect, or because she's too easy and they wanted to make her harder. Drones in stealth mode didn't make her easier against decent players, and they certainly weren't oppressive. These changes were done with the sole intention of coddling bad survivors, holding their hands because they have the spatial awareness of a dead cockroach and have made that everyone else's problem by whining about it on Twitter for the past year. It's that mod that existed that turned Trapper's traps neon pink, added to the base game and visible from a 16-meter range. At least in this case, they nerfed this killer because some survivors are morons and complained about it loud enough. It's just that simple. So, yeah, it's all looking pretty bad, but what can we do to make the best of these changes? How can we keep Skull Merchant at least playable and interesting until this rework comes eventually? Okay, so right now I'm talking to anybody at Behaviour who might be watching this video, because if you want to salvage the Skull Merchant PTB changes, you know, make her not the actual worst killer in the game, then here's how you do it. Which I hope is true, because it would take a particularly spineless and spiteful dev team to go out with the intention of murdering a character just to appease the horde of ravening chimpanzees baying for her blood. Oh, but I'm sure it was just a mistake, you know, just an unintentional overcorrection. First thing you gotta do, revert the nerf to the hinder. Even at 10%, the hinder still becomes 2/3 of a clown bottle for a limited duration that requires the survivor to already be claw trapped. Without the haste, the hinder is fine at 10%. Again, at 5%, the hinder is literally worse than not using your power at all and just bloodlusting instead. If it's part of her kit, it should at least be worth using sometimes. And if you don't want it to be worth using, get rid of it altogether. Replace it with a brand new effect entirely. Hang on a minute, I wonder if someone else has already thought of that idea. The second change, revert the changes to drone visibility. Take us back to a separate stealth mode and scouting mode. Even in stealth mode, drones were perfectly visible before if the survivor was paying attention. Beams being permanently visible at 16 meters means that no matter how oblivious they are, survivors will never, ever get punished for running into a drone placed as a trap. Against a trap killer, I don't think paying attention to the ground and the housing on the drone to not lose 1/3 of the first health state is too much to ask of survivors. And if you think it is, then Hag and Trapper players should probably start shitting themselves right now, because they get far more reward from their traps with way less visual cues that tell the survivor that there's a trap there. Which ties into the third change. It's one I've been wanting for a little while now. While in stealth mode, drones don't rotate at all until the beam is tripped and it's put into scouting mode. It's clear with the removal of the haste and one of the beams that you want Skull Merchant's chase to feel less overbearing to make her more fun to play against, so why not lighten the load further on the survivors in chase, and at the same time encourage the killer to set drones up ahead of time. With only one beam, trap drones become literally half as effective as they used to be, even if we ignore all the other nerfs that make them useless, because now there's half a chance of the beam just not being where it's supposed to be when a survivor walks into it. Instead of putting whether the power does anything at all in the hands of RNGesus, why not put it in the hands of the players, both the killer and the survivor alike? Stopping stealth mode drones rotating means you can place a trap to guard a specific area with 100% consistency if you have the forethought to set it up properly. Survivors can still disarm it if they find it ahead of time, but it means that against survivors who aren't paying attention, your power might actually do something once in a while, and will reward Skull Merchant players who can plow around survivor pathing like Hag or Trapper would. This would also have the side effect of making drones even easier to track in chase, because now instead of tracking a consistently rotating beam, you can just watch where it is when she places it, because the beam won't move until you trigger it. So you can play around it similar to playing against an artist. It gives the killer much more agency outside of the chase, and the survivor an easier mental management time in chase. It's a win-win that would make the killer feel better to play and play against, so there really is no reason not to do it. But before we wrap it up, there's one more thing I want to talk about. The evisceration of this killer is clearly just a band-aid. It's meant to fix the killer's pain points before a big rework comes next year. Oh, hello, Max. Oh, sorry, there's a dog here. Max, what do you think about Skull Merchant, Max, eh? Hey, you smelly little creature. This is Max. He likes Skull Merchant, don't you, mate? Don't you, mate? Yeah. Yes. Behaviour can't balance their killer, can they, Max? No, they can't. Hello. Yeah. Alright, bye. Whatever those changes are, they better come quickly, and they better be fucking brilliant. And I don't mean like the general community definition of brilliant, like a dash killer, a mid-range zoning M2, or potentially, if they're feeling spicy, a dash killer with a mid-range zoning M2. I mean something that the existing player base the killer has can still enjoy. At least however many of us will still be left playing her after the nerfs. She's a really interesting new breed of trap killer, and that identity should be preserved with her rework whenever that hits. I put a lot of time into learning the rotation timings and getting my eye in, laser tagging and finding all the little spots on the maps and all the other stuff that makes Merchant special, and a lot more time making a giant video to teach everybody about it. And when Skull Merchant 3.0 hits, whenever that comes, I want that unique mechanical identity and complexity to stay as much as it can. But I need to make something clear. This rework she's getting not only has to be good, but it has to be coming at least somewhat soon. Okay, so I have a couple of updates from the developer livestream that just happened right before the PTB went live. And there's a couple of important things I thought warranted making it into this video. First was the explicit reason given for why the nerf seemed so heavy-handed. Apparently at mid-MMR, Skull Merchant's kill rate was way too high, even taking survivors giving up on first hook or disconnecting into account, sitting at about 68 to 70%, when their target kill rate is 62%. So these nerfs are intended to bring her kill rate into line. While the stats look pretty damning on the face of it, I think they're misinterpreting them quite significantly, and everything I've been saying about the killer for the past year kind of proves that. Merchant's kill rate isn't high because she's good, Merchant's kill rate is high because she's easy. And you can see this by looking at the kill rate charts and looking at the other killers who are up there in kill rates. Killers like Myers, Freddy, Sadako and Dredge. These killers aren't good, they're just more intuitive to play than they are to play against. Changes made to Skull Merchant should be focused at making her harder, not making her weaker. And remember, the stats we were given were mid-MMR kill rates. I want to see what they're like at high MMR when survivors start playing with their monitors turned on more consistently. I suspect once early giving ups and DCs are taken into account, it's going to be a lot closer to the range you're looking for, because against smart players, Skull Merchant is not good. The other important piece of information from that live stream is that we have an approximate ETA for the Skull Merchant rework to hit. Mandy Talk said we should be looking at second half 2025, and assured us it won't take 2 years like the Twins rework did. And while I appreciate the transparency, I am still a little bit concerned. First of all, the second half 2025 is a year from now. If the killer is going live the way she is on PTB, she will be D tier for a year because they just felt like it. And that's assuming the rework comes on time. This is a rework made by BHVR, who have a track record of massively delaying major reworks. Freddy and Myers have been closely monitored and due for changes for years now, and they've got nothing substantial. Twins hit unexpected complexities that delayed theirs by a full year. What's to say Merchant isn't about to get the same treatment? And we were meant to have the Swamp rework in January 2024. It's almost October now, and we still haven't got it. So when they say second half of 2025 for the Merchant rework, my brain reads that as second half of 2025 at the earliest. I know I might seem harsh or uncharitable here, but I'm going to be clear about something. After they botched the Twins rework as hard as they did, I have no confidence in BHVR reworking the killers I play anymore. The Twins PTB should never have made it to the PTB, and until BHVR restores my confidence with some good and timely changes, it's going to stay that way. And do you want to know the worst bit? If all these nerfs make it to the live build, even though she'll most likely be the worst killer in the game, I'm probably going to keep playing her anyway, because, actually, I'll let you in on a little secret. I never played Skull Merchant because she was good. Because even before the nerfs, she wasn't good in the first place. If I wanted to play a macro play dependent killer who could steamroll matches without much effort, I'd just play Singularity. Especially after the buffs, I feel like I can kind of play Singularity in my sleep. And I didn't play Merchant because she was easy either. If I wanted to play a killer who could be played decently while I was, say, concussed or playing Magic the Gathering, I'd play Legion, Wraith, Chucky, Legion, Trickster, Myers, Legion, or even Legion. I play Skull Merchant because she lets me do interesting things that no other killer lets me do, and makes me think in interesting ways. And aside from the nerfs to trap drones, she can still do most of that even after the nerfs. I made a 90-minute long guide on this killer because at the end of the day, she's really interesting to me. She is the most fun I have playing Dead by Daylight. So I suppose what I'm really asking here is, whatever you've got planned for Skull Merchant 3.0 next year, let me in. I'll sign an NDA, I'll do whatever you guys need me to do. Just let me in on whatever you're planning to do to her. Because I don't want to make another video in 6 to 12 months' time when you've got this rework done, lamenting the death of my killer again. This is the second time in 6 months now that I've had to get on YouTube and plead for the continued existence of a killer that I really love. Like, if you guys do this anymore, my blood pressure is fucked. If I have a stroke or a heart attack or something by the time I hit 30, I'm blaming the balance team. Oh yeah, I guess what I'm really saying here is, if you want the killer dead, like dead, worst killer in the game dead, then yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I'll keep playing her, but I don't think anybody else is going to. And if it looks like she's staying the way she is on PTB until that rework hits, I'm going to be really annoying about it until that day comes. Like, I'm going to be so annoying, you have no idea. But if you want the killer to be a functional part of Dead by Daylight until this rework hits, then you've got to revert the stealth drone nerfs, revert the hinder nerfs, and make stealth mode drones unable to rotate. She'll still be bad, she'll still be harder to play, she'll be weaker, her kill rate will definitely drop, but the power might actually be worth using sometimes. The killer might still have some people wanting to play her. And is that really too much to ask?